not well recognized in today's world. Yet it was India's eighth aviation disaster in a span of 3 years, from July 1988 to August 1991. Indian Airlines IC-257 was a scheduled domestic flight from Calcutta, now Kolkata, to Imphal, the capital of Manipur state in India. On the 16th of August 1991, the Boeing 737-200, bearing the registration number VT-EFL, crashed shortly on approach to the Imphal Airport, impacting the Thangjing Hill as shown, killing all of the 63 passengers and 6 crew members on board. Now, what happened and what went wrong during the final moments of Indian Airlines flight IC-257? Flight IC-257 departed at 11:54 Indian Standard Time from Calcutta International Airport and was cleared to the flight level 70 according to the CVR transcripts provided by the investigative report on this occurrence. On the day of the incident, the Boeing 737 was commanded by Captain Shekhar Haldar, who had a total of 3,738 flying hours, 2,369 of which were on the Boeing 737 and the remainder on the F-27. The co-pilot, on the other hand, was Captain D.B. Roy Chaudhary, had acquired close to 1,647 total flying hours. Both the pilots were extremely experienced and had flown into Imphal several times. This Boeing 737-200 flown by Indian Airlines was built to fly in short to medium ranges, and 54 Boeing 737-200 aircrafts are still in service as of October 16, 2020. The plane was powered by two Pratt& Whitney turbofan engines as shown. According to planespotters.net, the aircraft was delivered to Indian Airlines on the November 28, 1977 and served with the airline for 4 years until being handled to the Indian Air Force on August 26, 1981. The Boeing 737 was leased back and forth from the Indian Air Force until the accident on August 16, 1991. At about 12:39 Indian Standard Time, IC-257 was at 10,000 feet 12 miles inbound to the Imphal Airport and was directed to maintain and report overhead VOR. At 12:42 Indian Standard Time, about 40 minutes after leaving Calcutta, IC-257 was instructed by Imphal ATC to proceed for an ILS approach to runway 04 and descend to 5,000 feet. An ILS approach is a radio navigation system that guides airplanes as they approach the runway. It directs them until the plane is within 200 feet of the ground and 1.5 miles of the runway. ILS employs two-way radio signals, a localizer for horizontal guidance, and a glide scope for vertical guidance. All of these instructions are shown on the plane's instruments, and the pilot in command moves the plane until the runway is in sight. While the IC-257 was descending and preparing for an ILS approach to runway 04, the Imphal Airport authorized another Indian airline Airbus A320 flight number IC-890 to depart for Guwahati. Imphal Airport attempted to contact IC-257 at 12:44 Indian Standard Time shortly after IC-890's departure, but received no response. Later, Imphal ATC was notified of the IC-257 crash on Thangjing Hill, about 20.5 nautical miles from runway 04. Now, before we go through what occurred and what went wrong with IC-257, let us look into the approach path of the ILS runway 04 of Imphal Airport. According to the ILS letdown chart, after reporting overhead VOR at 10,000 feet, the aircraft should descend to 8,000 feet on the holding pattern and then proceed on to the outbound leg on radial 217 for 2 minutes 30 seconds from VOR upon a further descent from 8,000 feet to 5,000 feet. The airplane is required to descend 4,200 feet during the procedure turn, proceed inbound after catching the localizer, a teardrop shaped entrance. However, the IC-257 did not report overhead VOR and in fact commenced right turn when it was about 14 nautical miles away from the VOR at an altitude of 10,000 feet. While executing the turn, the aircraft started its descent. Following the completion of the right turn, the aircraft flew in the direction of 196 to 210 degrees for approximately 1 minute 35 seconds, during which time the aircraft descended to an altitude of approximately 6,880 feet, but the ILS letdown chart indicated that the aircraft should have descended to an altitude of 5,000 feet before the start of the procedure turn. Also during the outbound leg, The Indian Airlines Flight 257 speed ranged between 175 and 180 knots, which was faster than the maximum permitted speed of 170 knots. While during the procedure turn, it went to a distance of about 20.5 nautical miles from VOR, compared to the 13 nautical miles from VOR if proper ILS procedure was carried out, thereby impacting the hill. Now, why was IC-257 so off course, you might be thinking? The main reason the aircraft flew so far away from the VOR was that it did not fly overhead VOR and made a right turn for an outbound about 14 nautical miles away from the VOR. The crew could not have seen the hill ahead of them before the impact, since the aircraft was doing a procedural maneuver far away from its typical location and the weather was overcast with no clear vision. Approximately 6 seconds before the crash, the ground proximity warning system alert went on.
Terrain. Pull up.
Soon after the incident, a detailed investigation was conducted, which led to the following conclusion. Since distance measuring equipment is a very crucial navigational aid for the pilots, on the 16th of August 1991, it had not been installed at the Imphal Airport. However, it was made operational on the 29th of November 1991. The runway visual range, one of the main criteria for minima on instrument approaches and also the main criterion used to determine the category of visual aids that are installed at an airport, was not present at the Imphal Airport on the 16th of August 1991. From descending 10 minutes earlier than the operational flight plan to several incorrect calls to Imphal ATC, not reporting to the overhead VOR as described by the ILS chart, and turning the procedural right much shorter instead of turning left to overhead VOR for teardrop entry, all contributed to the disaster. Most notably, the flight crew of the IC-257 exhibited a complete lack of professionalism and preparedness, failing to follow the mandatory operational flight plan and the ILS chart. Instead of relying upon the prescribed flight plan, the captain was completely influenced by his extreme familiarity with the terrain. Furthermore, the co pilot had no involvement in correcting captain's deviations from the operational flight plan until the time of impact of the aircraft. Following the investigations, 50 suggestions were made, including Indian airline pilots were required to follow the specified operational procedures. The cockpit voice recorders and the flight data recorders were checked regularly. A comprehensive revamp of Indian Airlines pilot training program with a focus on utilizing accurate callouts using navigational aids rather than visual. Similar training for pilots when ground proximity warning system warnings were activated. And most importantly, crew resources management was taught. The career patterns of Indian airline pilots were reviewed. All operational Boeing 737s that were registered with the DGCA were then outfitted with digital flight data recorders and emergency locator transmitters, and many others. Now, looking back, the disaster of Indian Airlines flight IC-257 was entirely avoidable if the flight crew had not strayed from their normal protocols. As a result, many of the suggestions made by this particular instance are being followed throughout the whole aviation sector. The deaths of 63 passengers and 6 crew members serve as a tragic reminder to many aviation professionals that there are no shortcuts and that following the protocols outlined is deemed essential. What other air disasters would you like me to cover? Please comment down below. I hope you leave a like and subscribe to my channel for podcast interviews and air disaster episodes.